bad people support the Palestinians, and people who support the Palestinians are bad. That's not news, but they still struggle to really, have fully convey to us where they are, who they are, and where they stand, because they are still in the West in many cases. Some of us still have, I've said in the past, running on fumes, kind of philosophically, but we still are running. So. Some people struggle with that. One of those people is Emily Thornberry. Emily Thornberry is a Labour Party in the UK member of Parliament. She was the former shadow foreign secretary under Jihad Jeremy Corbyn, who we've talked about on this channel. And so what you're going to see with the interview that she did about those two members of parliament who were denied entry to Israel isn't much of a surprise, but it is something that needs to be taken apart, uh, her part in it, as well as the interviewer's part in it. We're gonna do that here. Welcome to the reality show. I'm Razi Ginsburg. I'm joined by Jonathan Honig and Michael Kaufman. Uh, Anything you want to say before we go into the video, or should we go straight into it?
Let's hit it.
Daniel?
Well, let's speak now to Emily Thornberry, the chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. Emily Thornberry, thanks very much for taking the time to speak to us this Sunday. The Israeli government say that these two MPs had accused Israel of false claims, were actively involved in promoting sanctions against Israeli ministers and supported campaigns aimed at boycotting the state of Israel. So they were perfectly entitled to deny them entry.
I think that Israel was really badly advised on this. These are two young women who have huge clout. They're really well respected in Parliament. They're very well informed, highly intelligent young women, and frankly, real leaders. And actually, they speak on behalf of a lot of people, and a lot of people listen to what it is that they have to say. So instead of alienating them, I really think that Israel should try to engage them rather than humiliate them in this fashion. It's such bad news. Israel is supposed to be an ally, and you ought to be able to tell your friends the truth. And frankly, Israel should stop being so thin-skinned and actually listen to the criticism that there is being made of Israel around the world, because a lot of it is legitimate.
All right. So, okay. First of all, she's talking about the topic itself, which is, the denial of entry, and then she goes on and kind of shows us who she is once again. But interestingly, you may have noticed twice she mentions these two young women. I counted at least two other times in these 10 minutes. Like, this is the feminist equivalent of a person who's actually what feminists think all men are, who goes, yeah, okay, darling, whatever. I mean, this is what do we care that they're young women? If they're right, it doesn't matter. They could be old men, right? So, but yeah, Emily Thornberry wanted to make that point because supposedly this is somehow that's a part of it. Jonathan.
Well, it's kind of like when they say, well, they were just a journalist, covering in Gaza, a journalist in Gaza, or a teacher in Gaza, and the actuality is something very different. So yeah, I mean and also I'll just drop the idea that the context of this. I mean, Israel literally is in a state of war, and you would think should have some real vested interest in marshaling who is coming in and spreading what types of ideas.
Yeah, Michael.
Well, first of all, the UK is an ally, and we can talk about that in more detail and how allies treat each other. It's pretty clear that what's going on in the UK is hardly pro-Israel in any sense of the word. The second thing is these two are respected leaders who are followed by a lot of people. I mean, AOC in America is followed by a lot of people, almost all of whom are complete idiots, and the remainder are total idiots. So it's absurd. Now, there's no question these two are not followed. They're not leaders. They've never done anything in their life, and all they do is criticize, and they like to pick on Israel. So Israel absolutely had the right to do it, and I'm glad they did it. And frankly, they should have humiliated them, and they should continue to humiliate them.
Yeah, and of course, the question has been raised, and it's a valid question, and the answer to it, I would guess, is yes. Was this a publicity stunt? Did they know they're not going to be allowed in? They said something about it being an official delegation, but it wasn't an official delegation between the countries. It was an official delegation of a couple of organizations, one of which is openly pro-Hamas and tried to get it off the proscribed terrorist organizations list. So they said when they tried to enter that they're there in an intelligence gathering mission against the country that war was launched against, and they're supporting the enemy. By the way, actually, you know what? Emily Thornbury does most of our work for us. So there are things I want to say that I'm going to hold back and say once we watch some more.
That's the reason, isn't it, Emily, that they've barred them. They say they're making false claims. They're actively promoting sanctions against Israeli ministers, and they're supporting campaigns aimed at boycotting Israel. I mean, if parliamentarians in other countries were doing the same sort of thing to us, we would not be happy about those guys coming here, would we?
Look, they were going with CARBU, which is a long-established organisation that's been taking people to the Middle East for more than 20 years. I've been on one of these trips myself, lots of people have, and they take them to the region so that people can actually see what's going on the ground as opposed to listening to propaganda. And that's important. We've got a place on the Security Council, we have a leadership role internationally, and our parliamentarians need to know what's going on. And CARBU is one of the organisations that helps to inform MPs. Now, as for sanctions, I have to say, I really don't think that the Israelis should be surprised that many of us, and I include myself, believe that there should be sanctions against particular government ministers. There are two extremist government ministers who talk about trying to snatch the West Bank, who talk about bringing it into Greater Israel. How will that result in there being a two-state solution? People who have been.
All right. Wait. There's so much. How will that result in being a two-state solution? I mean, I don't know, but let's not do it if it will. It's very interesting that in the same breath, she talks about MPs from Britain going to a country in war to help its enemy exterminate all its people, but they don't want a couple of the ministers from Israel. Now, the thing with diplomacy, and one of many, many reasons why I would never want to be a politician, is if you have diplomatic relations with a country, you accept their government. You don't have to like it. If you don't like it so much, you might cut diplomatic ties, but you accept it. You don't choose, Israel allowed Blinken into the country, you can't choose the other country's leaders. It's very, very bizarre to see her justifying the UK doing this with ministers and Israel while at war, not being allowed to. But again, we know what Emily Thornberry actually wants, which is Israel to lose the war. Jonathan.
Yeah, I mean, she said that seems to be the subtle subtext, and like so much of the Western media over the last how many ever year plus months, the quiet subtext, Razi, is big bad Israel, abusing rights, denying basic rights, causing genocide, causing starvation. So, the upside is always to portray Israel as guilty, as the enemy, as the oppressor, as the offender, and it's simply not the case.
Michael.
Well, I love some of her arguments. The first one was that they were brought in by CARBU, which has been doing this for a long time. That doesn't make it right. I mean, it's absurd. We had slavery for a long time in Britain and also in the United States. It didn't make it right. We had no women's vote for a very long time. That didn't make it right. We had no black vote for a very long time. Didn't make it right. So first of all, this sort of old school tradition bullshit is really it should be shunned, and it should be laughed at by any thoughtful person. The second point is this notion of international law, this sort of mystical international law that doesn't apply to terrorists and certainly doesn't apply to Hamas. And even the UK came out with a very objective analysis of what Hamas did on October 7th and subsequently. And it was quite pro-Israel, is probably the wrong word, because documented the deaths, the nasty deaths of 1,200 Israelis plus the taking of the hostages. But the UK, as far as I'm aware, actually accepted this document. So which showed that Hamas violated every international law possible, to the extent that there's even such a thing as international law. And this throwing it out there. The next thing that I loved about her, what she said, was that they're on the UK Security Council, the UN Security Council. So they're a standing member of the UN Security. Like, so is China, so is Russia. The fact that you have decided to back the same people that China, Russia, and Iran are backing currently you should be disgusted. And we are disgusted with you, Dame lady. Because she's a dame, so she must know what she's doing. That's the other part of this whole shtick.
Yeah,
you know, it's the equivalent of a knight, right? I mean, it's sir. So the whole thing is really, it's despicable, and you have to be talking to people that are really fundamentally stupid if they follow this. Almost everything she says is fraught with, like you said, Razi. There's just a ton of stuff you could say here. But everything she says is so full of it. But she doesn't talk about the fact that Israel's a democracy, except to say that they're our allies. With the UK as allies, who needs enemies?
Yeah, and Emily Thornberry. I mean, the UK is not an ally to Israel, but Emily Thornberry
clearly, that's what the other funny thing was.
But Emily Thornberry is against UK policy because she thinks it's too pro-Israel for her taste. And yeah, this UN Security Council where we have a leadership role.
Yeah, we
sounded almost like, you know, I'm very special. My mother told me. I mean, she was trying to convince herself that Britain is more important than it currently is. You know, this may have been true 150 years ago, but not really anymore. Okay, I don't remember if there was something else I wanted to say here, but I did want to kind of point out the actually there is a super chat, or it would have been super chat, but Bull Moose couldn't have sent it as a super chat. Thank you, Bull Moose. Bull Moose says, those parliamentarians should have been arrested for literal espionage. Why did Israel release them? I also had an issue with the fact that Israel didn't actually detain them, and you know, as soon as they said we're here on a intelligence gathering mission, why were they not detained? And I think that in part is why the response here is so strong, because Israel's reaction to their visit was so weak. And we know this even from military action. You know, when Israel's military action in the first few months of this war was not what it is, you know, in the later stages of the war, the attacks on Israel, especially from politicians, were much stronger than what we've heard like during Lebanon and during some of the more impressive operations. So yeah, Israel, if you really stand up for yourself, the other side will back down. So yeah, for context, because people here probably know Jeremy Corbyn, and probably if you're not in the UK, don't know Emily Thornberry. They are you know, very close geographically as well. One of them, I can't remember which one is which, but one of them is the member of parliament for Islington North, and the other for Islington South. Of course, Jeremy Corbyn no longer in the Labour Party. He was kicked out for anti-Semitism. Interesting, considering who's still in that party. But yeah, here's a moment just for context of Jeremy Corbyn and Emily Thornberry celebrating on election night 2015 or 17, or 19, whatever. Take a look. All right, we get the we get the point. All right, let's continue with the interview. Poor Daniel, I'm confusing him with all these videos, but I wanted to throw that
their own words. And for that reason, there is a campaign to have at least two of those government ministers sanctioned, because on the face of it, their behaviour is in breach of international law.
Well, you're talking about Bezalel Smotrich and Itamar Ben-Gvir, two ministers who've been kind of in and out of the cabinet there. You're suggesting that their behaviour is a threat to international law, maybe in breach of international law. We know that Prime Minister Netanyahu is the subject to an ICC arrest warrant for war crimes, for breaching international law. But yet our government doesn't seem to want to get close to saying some of those things about the Prime Minister of Israel. We had the Foreign Secretary recently when saying that Israel had broken international law, then coming back a few days later saying that, no, actually he misspoke. They were closer. I mean, that's mealy mouth, Emily, isn't it? You know.
Wait. Let's pause before we hear her answer, because again, journalism. Pretend to ask a slightly difficult, question. Not, oh, those Jews, they're really bad, aren't they? Yeah. You know how bad they are. Like even the International Court of Justice says they're bad. I mean, come on, people. Jonathan.
Yeah, well, the ICC court to summons, or the UN court summons, I mean, literally not worth the paper that they're printed on. But my sense to people like this woman, status in the UN means a lot and goes a great way.
Yeah, Michael.
On the face of it, all this kind of crap. I mean, I thought in the UK that people wearing keffiyehs and screaming "Death to America, Death to Israel" and clearly anti-Semitic was against British law. I thought. I mean, I've seen that they don't enforce any of it, but that's okay. And obviously, by the way, Miss Lady, Hungary just said that the ICC stuff doesn't matter, and you know what? Nobody cares. The U.S. said the ICC stuff doesn't matter, and she takes her orders. She can say whatever she wants. Britain largely takes a lot of their lead from the U.S. And they can become, if they want to align themselves with Russia and China, so be it. Which is what she's headed to. We should be very clear that the Labour Party in the UK now is very anti-Semitic. They are very anti-Israel. They pretend to believe in a two-state solution when the Arab part of this two-state solution believes in a single-state solution, meaning eliminate Israel. And she's on the wrong side of history. And she and these two idiot women who work for the Labour Party are also on the wrong side of history. We do,
idiot young women.
Well, sorry? The
Idiot
young
young women, I was saying.
Yes, who have a lot of following. Just because you have a lot of following doesn't mean anything. Anyway, the whole thing is so devoid of any legitimacy from any foundational principles of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, and the other things that we, even reason and self-esteem, we all understand. The last comment I'll make is because of this West Bank comment, which is absurd. The West Bank Arab towns are terrorist states. They are essentially completely infiltrated with munitions, just as Gaza was. There's very little difference. And Israel has had to conduct quietly massive operations to neutralize these terrorists and to recover all kinds of military equipment and so on and so forth. The West Bank is not a bunch of nice villages that are trying to live in peace. And they are not trying to build a culture, just like in Gaza, they're not trying to build a civilization or a culture. They are chaotic terrorists who love death and destruction. And this notion the West Bank is some good place is just part of this stupid myth that people like to perpetuate so that we can pretend that a two-state solution is a viable solution. There is no two-state solution right now. There's no two-state leadership on the other side that has any interest in two states. All they have interest in is terrorism.
All right, let's see how she handles this tough question. Let's see her response.
Say that they have, and they've been barred from the country, whereas the Foreign Secretary can't.
I think we're talking about angels dancing on top of a pin. Can I just say the principle is this, right? Is that when it comes to breaches of international law, when it comes to convicting people in international criminal courts, that is for the courts to decide. There has to be a reckoning at some stage. And it's wrong for politicians to decide what it is that people, whether there has been a breach or not. But what you can do is you can say that there is a danger of breaches. And when it comes to sanctions, when there is prima facie evidence that there is a breach of international law, you can then impose sanctions. So, that's we can go through this if you want to, but in the end, it's not for politicians to be the court court to be the judge and jury, but politicians can decide that they won't sell arms to a country if they think that there is a risk of international law being breached, and sanctions can be applied if it is believed that there has been that individuals are breaching international law. But actually convicting them of those things has to be done by a court.
Absolutely, and understood. And I'm sure that, I mean, can you tell us, have Abdeslam and Yuan Yang actually gone as far as to say that Israel is in breach, not in danger, but is in breach of international law?
Listen, I don't know. Listen,
okay.
This is not what's it. Can I just say, I really don't think that. I know it's not for me. I mean, it's for you to ask the questions and for me to answer them. I appreciate that. But honestly, there are so many important things going on in the Middle East at the moment. For us to be debating whether or not people are in breach or might be in breach, it doesn't matter. What matters is that it has to stop.
All right. Yeah. Okay. You know the expression, even an Emily Thornberry is right twice a day. Yeah. It really doesn't matter if it's in breach, if it's not in breach. It's bullshit law as law. But actually, Michael, you were saying it doesn't matter. It does matter because, when Netanyahu was flying from Hungary to the U.S., he had to kind of take a different flight path so as not to fly, through Irish airspace in case there was an emergency landing and he gets arrested. So it does matter, and we should hold those who make it matter to account, because they are the bad guys who are taking the moral high ground, shockingly, in today's world.
Yeah, I mean, read what Miss Rand wrote about the United Nations back in the 60s, maybe early 70s, I believe, and read about in a new textbook of Americanism what she wrote about the validity of so-called international law. Emily Thornberry keeps citing international law as everything, and Rand has some choice words to say about that. So recommend you check that out.
But notice that our UK foreign secretary here doesn't, or deputy, whatever the heck she is, doesn't make any comment about violations of international law by Hamas. That they are completely immune because, after all, they are a terrorist organization, so they're not under international law. But I agree, completely. I mean, all the International Criminal Court did was to invalidate, to prove to everyone that it is about as trustworthy and based on moral grounds as the UN itself. And the UN, with its numerous sanctions against Israel, which are more than all the other countries put together, and more than anything against Iran and its terrorist organizations put together, it just completely invalidates these institutions. She wants to invalidate the Labor Party. Now, we have the same thing going on in America, by the way. The Democrats, the crazy end of the Democrats, the progressives, want to invalidate the entire Democratic Party. They are arguing for I think the parallels are really remarkable. The Democrats are currently arguing that gang leaders that are illegal immigrants to begin with, who are known to commit criminal acts here, and I'm not saying proven in a court of law, but they are illegal immigrants, so they're already criminals that need to be deported. But they're gang members, and the Democrats are arguing that they deserve the same due process rights, and they need to be left in America, and, by the way, put out on bail pending their trial. And it's this complete double standard of the worse you are, the more despicable you are, the more evil you are, you get everything. And those of us who are supposed to be civilized, we are judged nothing. It is absolutely amazing what's going on the progressive side. And this woman, couched in all her flowery bullshit, is defending two people who clearly have Israel's worst interests in mind.
Yes, I disagree with you on immigration, as I've said in the past, although I absolutely agree with you on actual criminals. But whether somebody crossing the border, for a better life should be treated as a criminal.
Well, a gang member is always going to come to America. We have more people to steal from.
Well, yes, but there are people who come to America for a better life, and
but that's called legal immigration.
Well, in some cases, but it is actually this will be an interesting debate one day, but on the channel.
Not today.
When these news stories kind of cool down, and we can talk about different topics, but yeah, look,
I'll just say, Razi, that the thing I always have thought and understood about Israeli security is that even going to visit Israel, they asked you a multitude of questions at the border. I always assumed that there was research somehow being done on everyone coming in and out of Israel, scanning databases, scanning lists, making sure that they're not letting in a threat, an actual physical threat. And Rand has her wonderful essay, The Nature of Government, just says, what is the purpose of government for? It's in my opinion, I think Rand's opinion, to keep us safe, to protect our individual rights. So, if you've been making threats or quasi-threats or, encouraging war against a country, I would hope that that country would have you on a list and maybe want to stop and question you if you decided you wanted to come in for some intelligence gathering.
Yeah, and it's important to remember, we're living in a post-October 7th world where, anti-Semitism worldwide is at 1930s Germany levels. So that's a concern for Israel. And we are also living in a I don't remember the date of it, world, but a few months ago, there was a terrorist attack in Israel committed by somebody with a green card who came into Israel, was questioned and suspected, taken to a side room, questioned some more, and then let in, and then he committed a terrorist attack. So yes, it is a concern, and it's the fact that they're MPs doesn't change the fact that they're evil and they support terrorism. So how do we know that they're not going to at the very least aid it? And in a sense, they told us they will, or they told Israel they will. So yeah. More of Emily?
Please.
Is that there has to be peace in the Middle East. What matters is that no matter how much provocation there is from Israel in relation to the behavior that they've exhibited towards these two young women, what we have to do as a country is step back, take a breath, and say, how are we going to ensure that there is long-term peace in the Middle East? What role can we play in order to ensure that that happens? Because otherwise, if you just get involved in just being involved in these kind of rows, or how many angels can you get on top of this pin this week, you miss the point. The point is that at the moment, too many people are dying. We are moving too far away from there being a peace settlement in the Middle East, and we have to refocus and redouble our efforts and make sure that this happens. Because we can't just keep on watching this happen. I mean, look what happened in relation to those ambulance drivers and their staff. Look what happened there. Why are we not talking about that? Because the evidence on the phone of a dead man that was dug out of his grave showed that they had their lights on, that they were wearing reflective jackets, and that they were going to try to save people who had been shot. And instead, they were killed themselves.
So what is the appropriate
Okay. This is why we titled this Emily Thornberry Can't Stop Lying, because she goes from one thing to the next, and the one thing is a lie, and the next thing is a lie, and it's all prefaced with what role can we play in the Middle East peace process, where you are telling us, Emily, I'm sure our male audience is very happy that you're into role playing, but there is no role for a country that says it's on the side of Hamas, even if it doesn't say it in those words, in any process. And there is no peace process when one of the sides, the one that you happen to support, say they want to exterminate all the Jews, and the other side says that we want to not be exterminated. The peace process is getting rid of the Palestinians, sending them elsewhere. That is a peace process. And if you want peace in the Middle East, that's what you would support, and that's the role you would play. Jonathan.
I mean, her comment, too many people are dying. Well, why? Why are people dying? And her ellipse, ... is, well, because of Israel, obviously. We've got to, clamp down in Israel. And kind of, it's like out of context, anyone can try to argue for anything. So she leaves out the whole context of who not only started the conflict, but who is perpetuating the conflict. I mean, it's said before, if Hamas put down their weapons, if they wove a white flag, if they brought back the hostages or whatever remains, who knows, are left at this point, the war would end. But that's not what Hamas, that's not what the Palestinians want. And so it goes.
Michael.
Well, the first thing I would ask her is, let's take a step back, Dame, And let's ask you, after the July 7th train bombings or two bombings in London, I think there were 4 different places hit. I think 52 people were killed. I don't care that the terrorists were killed. And I think there were 800-ish people that were injured. How would she stop the fighting then? What deal would she do with the Islamic terrorists who committed those crimes? And how would she establish peace with them? And the answer is, hopefully, I don't know that, frankly, I'm not sure that anyone in the Labour Party today would actually think that we need to put these people in jail and subject them to life imprisonment or the death penalty, which I don't think you have in the UK, but you sure could use it for these types of people. I would hope that's what they would say, but I don't think they would. And I can tell you in America, there are a lot of people on the left, primarily, and the progressives, that also don't think that we should have held Al-Qaeda so accountable for 9/11, and they had some legitimate reasons and grievances and so on and so forth. We have this craziness that these people are being taught and which they are carrying into, including these 2 young women MPs who were just on a fact-finding mission. So that's the first thing. The second thing goes to what you guys said as well. Let's, as Jonathan pointed out, let's talk about the number of deaths. Let's roll back to October 8th, when there were 1,200 plus dead Israelis and 250 plus Israeli hostages. Let's roll back to then. What was your point at that point? Would you do nothing? Would you try to have a peace discussion with them? Would you sort of say, no matter what she said, no matter what the provocation, we should all try to make peace, no matter what the provocation? Maybe after Pearl Harbor, maybe the US shouldn't have come to Britain's aid, no matter what the provocation. Anyway, my point is that this is obviously a certain path to destruction of civilization. There is no peace with terrorists. And there's no need to have the notion that we would even discuss peace with terrorists is a disgrace and a complete failing philosophically and practically, both, of Western society right now.
I don't even think it's a turn the other cheek type of religion. It's much more, to me, it feels like a hatred of the good Israel.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's not a turn the other cheek. It's actually, let's embrace the people that have just killed us and our families and our brothers and sisters and our friends. And let's really talk it out with them, what their grievances are.
Yeah, and by the way, I don't know what Emily Thornberry herself said on October 7th or 8th or 9th. I know what her best friend over there, Jeremy Corbyn, tweeted on October 7th in the afternoon that there needs to be a ceasefire. At the point where basically Hamas was done, that's
Yes.
when he started calling for a ceasefire. So
Absolutely.
that is who these people are. Thank you, PC, for the super chat. PC says, Razi, relocate Palestinians to Pakistan. You know my criteria. If it's outside the nuclear fallout range, if Israel has to nuke them, then that is okay. Pakistan meets that criteria, so I'm all for it. Somebody here says, Razia is sick in the head. Thank you. And then El Rito says, sick in the head the right way. We'll let the people decide, but let's listen to some more of Emily.
To the Israeli government for these actions?
I think that the appropriate response is that we have to redouble our effort. We have to talk to the Americans in particular, because the Americans are the ones who can have real leverage when it comes to Israel. I think that we need to make sure that the Israelis understand that they are going nowhere, that they are achieving nothing when it comes to this, that what they have to do is they have to ensure that they get peace and prosperity and security for their people, but they will not have security until there is a settlement in the Middle East, which means a regional settlement, which means recognition by all of their neighbors, and that they are no longer imposing themselves on the Middle East, and there is no longer death and destruction.
Okay, this is okay. Oh my God, I don't know if we're gonna make it through this whole video, but that is so despicable. You know, first of all, we have to make it clear to the Israelis, you know, we have to left-splain to these Jews who are under attack how actually they have to stop imposing themselves on the Middle East. Ask any country in the Middle East, what is it about Israel that is imposing itself on you? And they, if they're honest, will say, we don't like the Jews are living. That is the imposition. That is the imposition. We have to stop the death and destruction. The death and destruction, if death and destruction as such is your problem, Gaza is not one of the worst places in the Middle East. There are worse places, but they only kill each other, and no Jews are involved in that. I mean,
Yeah, I
John.
mean, she says she wants a settlement. That's the most important thing, is a settlement. But isn't that what all of the settlements over the years have demonstrated? That when you come to a settlement with killers whose goal is your destruction, at best you're biding your time for a couple of weeks or months until the next onslaught begins. That's the difference between you can have a settlement, or you can actually destroy the enemy and win the war. In which case, it won't happen again. That's the end of it. But a settlement guarantees there'll be another October 7th. Just a matter of when.
Michael.
Well, not only does it guarantee it, but Hamas guaranteed it. I think it was Sinwar himself before he was eliminated that said we're going to continue October 7th type events until Israel is gone. We're very proud of it, and the more dead Gazans we have, the better. That's part of our martyrdom platform. That's what we want to do. And this woman is saying, great. And she knows this. Let's be very clear. She knows this. If we had a normal journalist, if we had a normal person asking the questions, they would bring that unfortunate fact up. But it's just like, snowball type crap where you get to rewrite history every day. It's why Israel violated international law, or may have, or appear to on the surface, whereas Hamas definitely did by your own UK report. But we're not going to mention the UK report because that's yesterday's discussion. And the people that listen to me, Dame Emily, have the attention span of a gnat, a small insect. And so we're just going to pretend that it all started yesterday and Israel's just bombing the crap out of Gaza. And the other funniest thing is, she said, and really, one thing if Joe Biden or Kamala Harris were in office, but the notion that the UK is going to go talk to the Americans, to talk to Donald Trump and Marco Rubio, and now recently the new Mike Huckabee now, and to put pressure on Israel. Remember Trump's last comment about Gaza. As far as Trump is concerned, you can rain hell on them, which Israel is not doing, by the way. They're fighting a little bit harder, but there's no real attempt here to finish the war at all, in my opinion. But this is such a vacuous comment. At least she admits the UK has no standing anymore with Israel, and nor should it.
Yeah, and on that point, yeah, Israel really does need to step it up, because there is really no guarantee that this line of credit will run for 3.5 years. Just do it. Do it now. All right, more of the clip.
A death to Palestinians, we need to move on, and we have to step away from that, and we have to work on that, and it won't happen without bringing the Americans on board. So that, for me, is the most important thing. Everything we do should be measured against, are we getting peace any closer? If we're not, what do we do instead?
And are we getting any closer to peace? You'll know that many people, I spoke to a lady yesterday from the Medical Aid for Palestinians, who thinks that Donald Trump and the administration have just given the green light to the Israelis to do whatever they want, not only in Gaza, but also in the West Bank, where some 40,000 people have been removed from their homes, and where there are more members of the Israeli army now than have been there for many, many years. And that is all because Donald Trump has allowed the Israelis now to do whatever they like.
All right, let's... Why is Emily Thornberry on this? Why isn't it just the interviewer, repeating that there are more soldiers now in Gaza because Donald Trump has allowed it? No, there are more soldiers now in Gaza because there were 0 soldiers for nearly 20 years when Israel decided to take a step towards peace by ethnically cleansing, if we want to ever use that term, Gaza of its Jews, civilians, and military, because that was going to bring peace. And what it brought was October 7th. And that is why there is military presence in Gaza. and Israeli presence in Gaza, hopefully forever. Jonathan.
Yeah, I mean, this is such a kind of friends of ours had a book, "Winning the Unwinnable War," and how I believe it's Alain Journo is the editor of that one, and just kind of goes to the fact that so many the Middle East, Razi, has just been such a cycle over decades and decades of uh, appeasement of evil and the evil returning once again like clockwork. So, to have new leaders, seemingly relatively young leaders, for advocating for the same appeasement, makes one kind of shake his head and say it's going to be another 50 years or more.
Yeah, just quickly, PC says this interviewer is useless. No, I mean, Lenin or whoever came up with that expression would completely disagree and say he's very, very useful. Michael.
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't agree more. I mean, it just defies imagination. I mean, first of all, Donald Trump did tell him to rain hell on them, and he definitely provides weapons finally, and a lot more than just the 2,000-pound bunker buster bombs. I mean, there's a lot of weapons that were held back in the U.S. From Israel, despite Joe Biden's baloney public rhetoric. And whatever Joe Biden's puppet masters were telling him to say, because clearly he didn't say these things. But there's no chance that Israel is going to listen to the UK and listen to these people. And the nice thing about the current education system, which is exactly what Dame Emily and her colleagues are relying on, is if you don't teach history, you can make up whatever crap story you want to now, and you can ignore all of it. So what happened for the last 75 years has no bearing on the future. You can start from scratch and pretend that everybody is morally equal. And you can pretend that terrorists have grievances too. Terrorists are people too. And all people are created equal. And all people's opinions are equal, and so on and so forth. And it just slides down from this la-la land that has been perpetuated by our educational system and by the national news medias in all of our countries. That this notion that just because someone picks up a gun and shoots you doesn't mean they have a legitimate cause. But that's the way the actions that are being taken today. We have it in America. We have people that commit crimes, steal stuff. That's okay. That's not real crimes. They must need the stuff. Therefore, need makes it okay. And if someone is that upset, the assumption is they're a good, rational person who believes in rational things. And if they reach that level of being upset, they must have a legitimate reason for it. That's great if you don't learn any history, and also you don't know how to build a culture, because you decided that everything we have in civilization got here by some happenstance, an accident of oppressive regimes in the West. And that's what's at the fundamental, at least to me, at the foundational basis of all of this is that our education systems have failed. And the philosophical underpinnings of those education systems have failed. And Ayn Rand was way ahead of her time. She understood that the weeds were growing 50 years ago, and nurtured with Qatari money and a whole bunch of liberal crazies money, like George Soros and so on, have now blossomed. And we have all this stuff turned on its head. All normal things are turned on their head and upside down. We have success being bad, we have merit being bad. And like you said at the beginning, Jonathan, it's praising, it's vilifying the good for being good, and suggesting that every ill in the world can be solved by making the good people who are working hard to fund and support our normal civilizations, if they pay more taxes and put up with more crap and accept more crime and more homelessness and more and more and more, it'll all just get better for everyone. And until the last dregs of society are improved and reach middle class, we are all guilty. This is their view. This is their philosophical view. We are all guilty of misconduct, and we are horrible people who need to be condemned and punished for our success and our belief in a good life.
Yeah, and this is the prevalent philosophy in the culture, which is why I'm going to use this, even though I want to get to some stuff in the clip. I want to just encourage people when they see stuff, when you see stuff like this in the culture, and it goes off. I don't know if anybody else criticized the interviewer, for example, for how horrible this is. We do this every day, twice a day on weekdays, and yeah, I always encourage people to become members for the many perks, and I still do. But today, I'm going to encourage people to look at stuff like this. Look at the response to those two MPs being denied entry. Look at the response to the armed medics in the gunfight that are somehow victims, like with a story that keeps repeating itself and that is reported Hamas talking points almost verbatim and without question. We call those people out. And if you are a supporter of the Ayn Rand Center UK, that is what you support. People who watched the channel yesterday may have noticed Daniel yesterday flew from Slovakia to London, produced and appeared on the Daily Objective, produced and appeared on the reality show, and then produced the live talk, the live stream of the talk by Keith Weiner, and then flew back to Slovakia and today appeared on the Daily Objective and is producing this. This is what your money goes to if you're supporting the Ayn Rand Center UK. And if you are, thank you very much for that. And now, with that, let's listen to some more of Emily Thornberry.
Tim.
I think that there are no serious solutions coming out of the White House at the moment. And clearly, they at least by not putting forward any serious solutions, Netanyahu seems to think that he has simply got a green light. And that has to stop. What we need to do as an international community is say to Donald Trump, there is a solution, there is a way forward, and this is it. But we need your assistance. What we need is for you to have the power of 12 presidents. All the others have failed, but you, Donald Trump, could do this. You could lean on the Israelis and you could make sure that not just the, no, that's wrong. It isn't the Israelis. It's the far-right government in Israel. Actually, they don't speak on behalf of all Israelis. I mean, let me just put that in, because I think that's only fair. It's not as though there's kind of universal acclaim for this far-right government within Israel. Anyway, the point is this, is that you can put pressure on this far-right government and you can make sure that they understand that America lines up with the rest of the international community and say there is only one way forward, and that is that you must come to an agreement with the Middle East. You have to be at peace with your neighbours, and the only way that's going to work is if there is a state for Palestine and security for the
Emily,
Israelis.
he's talked about a Riviera on the Mediterranean. What if he's in agreement with the far right in the government? Then what?
Well, I mean, the point is that nobody's going anywhere, right? The Palestinians are not moving out anywhere. The Israelis are not going anywhere. These people are here, and they're here, and their children and their children's children will be there. We have to find a way whereby they can live together in peace. But the point is this, right, is that if Israel wants to have a largely Jewish democratic state, which is what they say they want, then how can you do that if it's one state and the majority of people will be Palestinians? I mean, it's
All right,
not
let's pause this because we do performing a public service. So I'm gonna help you out here, Emily. How do you do that? You kick them the fuck out. That's how you do that. And again, they have earned it, and that is what should happen, and that will bring peace to that part of the world. Jonathan.
Yeah, I mean, just listening to her, she sounds like so many of the college students over the last, year plus that we've heard who would present the situation as, the region is rife with violence. If only Israel would put down its weapons, if only Israel would stop, picking on its neighbors, then maybe we would have a chance for peace. It's like the whole setting up of the scenario as she does is backward as it gets.
Yeah, Michael.
Yeah, the way you have peace when terrorists are next to you is you eliminate the terrorists. And the second point is Israel, actually, America did make a serious solution, and it was to remove the Gazans. The third point is the Gazans are not there to stay. By the way, there's no there left. It is leveled. I mean, yes, there's a few buildings still standing. It's not going to take much longer for the Israelis to decimate most of those because Hamas is clearly not ever going to give up the hostages. And Israel is just going to do this thing, unfortunately, piecemeal, little by little. And so we'll have a few more dead Israeli soldiers, and I'm saying that cynically on purpose, because Netanyahu, and I don't agree with anything she said about the far-right government, and I'll comment on that in a minute, but Netanyahu is not going to definitively win this war anytime soon, because it's not, I don't know why, I don't want to get into his motivations. I think we all have ideas, but the point is they're not going to. And Gaza will be leveled. It is pretty much leveled as it is. It's almost uninhabitable. It will take a decade to rebuild the thing, because they got to clean up the mess that's there. Never mind, still apparently more than 50% of the terror tunnels are still there, remarkably, after all of this, just showing everybody where all her billions of good intentioned dollars went to. And they absolutely can move. And by the way, they're already starting to move. There's people, there's voluntary movement, et cetera. God knows what voluntary means. Probably the same thing it means in a Gazan election. It's all voluntary and free, and so on. And they will move. And by the way, Indonesia wants to take people and so on and so forth. It's fine. And Jordan and Egypt will take people, because America's going to put that hammer down. And Trump is fed up with this crap. And Trump actually agrees with her in the sense that he wants peace there, but he understands who the good guys are and who wants peace. The second point I'll make is Netanyahu definitely represents a lot of the right wing. He's not as right wing as many of the right wingers in his government, but I believe, and from people I've talked to, and also my wife, who talks to a lot of people, she speaks Hebrew, she's got a lot of friends. We have a pretty big network of what are mostly considered leftists in Israel, which is centrist by American standards, really centrist. But they were two-state solution believers. And even the almost, I would say 90% of the centrist leftist believers in other than the few that still read Haaretz, nobody in that group believes that there is a two-state solution anymore. Nobody believes that there's a state for Palestine anymore, because October 7th was so heinous. And the fact that they are still hostages stuck in Gaza, and considering the decimation of Gaza, showing that there's nobody in Gaza governing that has any sense or any interest in their population to reach anything, even vaguely resembling peace, means that there's no second state. There is Israel, and Israel will be there. And even if the US walked out tomorrow, Israel would, frankly, if the US gave up on Israel, Israel would probably go in and blow the crap out of Gaza and be done with it, because they would be stuck against the wall. And it's just nuts what's the kind of backwards thinking that this woman has, and all this notion that she's going to go pressure Trump to do exactly the opposite of what he's publicly said he's doing.
Yeah, good luck with that. I'd love to live stream that call if they'll allow it. Daniel, is there anything left of that interview? Oh, well, I don't think we'll make it through the whole 2 minutes, but let's see how long it takes her to trigger us again.
Just leaving it on that basis, so that's why you have to have two states, leaving aside any other arguments, but just simply on their own terms. There's no way that you can have a successful Israel, which is a largely Jewish democratic state, without there being two states. So, it's whenever I meet an Israeli, I always say, or an Israeli politician, I always say, how do you see Israel in 5 years' time? How is this going to work? Where are you going? What is going to happen? That challenge needs to be made by friends consistently and with clarity, and frankly with some calm, no matter how provocative.
Okay, all right, yeah, okay, I'll try to stay calm. There's no successful Israel. What is that? What she said? There's no way to have a successful Israel without a two-state solution. There is a successful Israel. It's one of the most successful countries in the world, and it exists despite being surrounded by these savages who want nothing more than to kill Jews. That is their only aspiration in life. It still exists. So without giving them a state, somehow Israel has made it so far, and I think it'll continue to make it. Jonathan.
Yeah, why would the Palestinians be rewarded with a state after committing this most latest attack and so on and so forth? And Raja, to your point, Israel, tremendously successful country, and not because of its appeasement, but because of its ideas and its Western capitalist, individualistic ideas. exactly the opposite of everything else in the Middle East, especially Gaza.
Yeah, and Susie says, after October 7th, anyone who believes there is a two-state solution is insane. I agree that anybody who believes there is that solution is probably insane, but the people who say it don't necessarily believe it, and they are more likely evil than insane. Michael.
Oh, they're definitely, there's no question they're evil. This is in the face of this. The other irony of this whole thing, and we had it on the show a couple of days ago with Daniel, was that the UN Charter actually requires that countries entering the UN be peace-seeking or peace-loving, and I forget the exact words. I think it was in the fourth article in there in the UN Charter, and it would be the exact opposite here, that you give people who are a terrorist organization. And by that extension, the West Bank should now, given what's gone on in the West Bank, let's be clear, that's also a terrorist organization run by the PLO, but also infiltrated by Hamas and Islamic Jihad, and a slurry of other completely corrupt terrorist organizations who've contributed exactly nothing to the world. And that's my last comment I'll make in this whole thing, is this notion that we Westerners, any of us, would be supporting this crazy idea that people like this who have, I mean, what has Iran given to the world since the Ayatollahs took over? What have the Houthis given to the world? What has Hezbollah given? Death and destruction. And that's it. And yet you see an increasing number of idiots, and they're evil, because the people that know some history are evil, and the young people are stupid. And they are stupid, and it's about time we stopped pretending that they're anything but stupid. They're uneducated, and they are uneducatable. It's all there. It's all in Wikipedia if you want to actually look and read stuff, but they would rather listen to sound bites of idiots like AOC and Dame Emily, and so on. And this is a huge problem. We need leadership to stand up. We also need philosophical leadership, as we do on this show.
Democracy Now! Sounds like a pretty harmless slogan, but it is the name of a very harmful and really evil organization. That is the topic of tomorrow's episode of the reality show. We're going to go through a video that Democracy Now! Did about the so-called killing of the medics. Yes, you know, these stories write themselves for us, or they're the people who promote them write it for us. Jonathan, parting thoughts, and where can people find more from you?
Just check out my new book, Can You Really Love a Dog? Leonard Peikoff and Ayn Rand on pets, at Amazon.
Michael, parting thoughts, where can people find more from you?
I think I said what I had to. Kaufman, 2Fs on LinkedIn.
I'm Razi Ginsburg on X. Join us tomorrow for the Daily Objective and the reality show. Thanks, guys, for joining. See you tomorrow.